Nazism and war form the hinge on which not just Germany's but Europe's 20th century turned. At the center of the tumultuous history of Europe during the 20th century was the spread and then the eventual containment, after enormous bloodshed, of the shock waves created by the First World War. With the First World War, the veneer of civility and indeed of civilization was stripped from societies across the European continent. The guns of August 1914 heralded an era in which tens of millions of Europeans met violent deaths, and hundreds of millions were subjugated by cruel dictatorships, in which the good of the individual was subordinated to what was held to be the collective good. With the destruction of the Third Reich in 1945, the tide was turned, through a savagely destructive world war and at enormous cost. Yet it was not until the end of the 20th century, with the passing of the post-war epoch, with German unification and the collapse of communism in the Soviet Union and across Eastern Europe, that the profoundly destructive developments that followed from the catastrophe of the First World War largely were laid to rest on the European continent. It follows that the origins of Nazism are seen here not to lie primarily in long-established social and economic structures somehow peculiar to Germany, but rather in the profoundly destabilizing effects of the First World War and Germany's defeat. Nevertheless, Nazism also was a manifestation and the culmination of a long-running theme in modern European history, namely, racism. The belief that human beings can be divided into races and that these races can be ordered in a hierarchy of human worth took shape and gained widespread support long before the guns began firing in 1914. Nazism needs, therefore, to be understood as an expression of a system of thought and belief that gained wide currency in 19th century Europe and that was hardly unique to Germany. What was unique to Germany, however, was that a band of political gangsters, inspired by a crude racist ideology, was able to capture power in one of the world's most developed industrial nations, and to use that power to make war on a hitherto unimaginable scale. It is this fact that allowed Nazism to become the most terrible application of racism that has yet surfaced in the history of the world. The Nazi campaigns of racist genocide, above all the attempt to wipe out the entire Jewish population of Europe, have rightly come to occupy center stage in recent research on the Third Reich. As interest in class and class consciousness has waned with the retreat of Marxism as an inspiration for historians, as new archival sources have become available, particularly on the activities of the Nazi wartime occupiers in Eastern Europe, and as historians have come to take Nazi ideology more seriously, race has been put at the center of historical investigations. Not just burgeoning research on the murder of Europe's Jews and the impressive and detailed investigations of Nazi occupation and genocide in eastern Poland, Galicia, Belarus, and the Baltic countries, but also studies of the leadership corps of the Reich Security Main Office, RSHA, which formed the executive core of the campaigns of genocide, of the regulation of marriage and family policy in Nazi Germany, of the Nazi assault on Europe's gypsies, of the treatment of people labeled asocial, of the criminal investigative police in the Third Reich, of Nazi settlement policies, of the economic empire created by the Schutzstaffel, SS, of medicine and eugenics, just to name a few, have placed race at the center of their deliberations. To write about Nazism today is to write about Nazi racism and its realization in deliberate, organized, comprehensive campaigns of mass murder. At its most strident, the new paradigm has been presented by Michael Burleigh and Wolfgang Wippermann, who write, "The main object of Nazi social policy remained the creation